As we expected, the leak of Chapter 31 came out a few hours ago, something you may have already seen, a short one-panel leak. Really interesting, in the midst of a situation where I think Inojin must decide whether to let Kobu die or even save his life. The brief leak begins with the continuation at the end of panel 30, when Koji, through his toad, manages to provoke anger or something similar that causes Mamushi to move to kill Kobu in the middle of the Hokage's office roof. However, on the other hand, Inojin is still Inojin. He never imagined that he would have to do something cruel, which is to take the life of someone who, in his opinion, is not guilty. Kobu is not an enemy, not a real threat, and at least that is Inojin's point of view. Amidst his doubts, especially regarding the mission to save Himawari, Inojin did not really understand the entire plan or even the strategy for this operation. This is because he remembered that any information Kashin Koji told him would trigger a branching future. To avoid such possibilities, Kashin Koji only gave Inojin the bare minimum of information. However, at this point, Inojin, who is still in control of Kobu's body, especially while in body transmission mode, faces a major consequence that I think most fans are aware of. The biggest risk is death. What I mean is, in this case, Inojin is controlling Kobu's body and consciousness. And in this mission, especially in a situation where Mamushi is about to kill Kobu, Inojin, who is in Kobu's body and consciousness, must immediately release his technique so that Inojin's consciousness returns to his original body. Because if Inojin does not release his control or consciousness over Kobu's body and Kobu truly dies, then the same will happen to Inojin. However, even though Inojin knows about this risk, he seems completely confused. Unfortunately, amid this confusion, or whatever Inojin is actually thinking, or even whether he is really hesitant to follow Kashin Koji's orders, unfortunately, that's all we get from this one panel. By the way, I'm Nim without an E. For at least the next 8 minutes, let's discuss something interesting, and I'm sure the majority of fans can't wait for Chapter 31 to come out. Oh yeah, considering that a few days ago this channel just got a strike from Shueisha, I'd really appreciate it if you guys could help buy subs to my other channel. So yeah, continuing briefly with the discussion of Chapter 31, it seems like we're getting more confirmation that, in my opinion, is really hard to intervene with. What I mean is, if we look at the spoilers for this chapter, it seems unlikely that this is a scene in the middle of the story or something like that. Given the situation and conditions, it feels more like the beginning of a scene. But what I really mean is that, indirectly, Ikemoto has confirmed Kobu's death. Considering Mamushi's movements, which may be enough to explain that there were no other movements or anything like that, Inojin really had no choice but to release his jutsu. However, at this point, what exactly happened to Kobu? But honestly, after seeing how the situation unfolded, I'm sure we can still believe that intervention is possible, even though Kobu is in real danger. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? Because, once again, in anime stories, especially in scenes where fans are convinced that it will be the end of the character's fate, plot twists can still happen. And I admit, although it's hard to imagine what kind of scenario or even plot twist could save Kobu, especially since Inojin has no choice but to release his jutsu, maybe some examples from the later chapters could serve as references. And once again, this is about Boruto. I mean, we know that during the battle in the Land of Wind against Jura, Boruto was brutally beaten and knocked unconscious for a while. And we also know that while Boruto was unconscious in a matter of seconds, Jura was ready to unleash a Biju bomb right at Boruto. However, even though Boruto was about to meet his end in a matter of seconds, an unexpected plot twist came from Kawaki. He appeared from somewhere we couldn't really guess, and we couldn't predict how Kawaki would intervene in Boruto's life or death situation. By appearing and stabbing one of Jura's Rinnegan eyes, he managed to thwart Jura's intention to kill Boruto. And once again, in this case too, Kobu would probably die in a matter of seconds. The circumstances and situation were exactly the same as when Boruto almost died at the hands of Jura. But let's say Kobu survives. Would you predict the same thing? Regardless of how Kobu ends up, one character who is truly a mystery or something that will intervene in the middle of the situation is Boruto himself, right? But what I really want to say is, what if it's not Boruto? So far, we know that Boruto has several times disrupted or triggered the future to branch out with several actions and even decisions made without involving Kashin Koji himself. Yeah, like the deal with Momoshiki or even with Kawaki. And especially since Boruto is a singularity of fate, do you think it's possible that Boruto doesn't know the real purpose of Koji's evil plan to kill Kobu? I mean, behind Koji's plan to kill Kobu, it all started with Shikamaru's position being threatened to be removed as Hokage. Meanwhile, In this operation, Shikamaru's position and role were crucial to the success of defeating and also foiling Mamushi's plan itself. So in other words, if Boruto knew what was behind all this, especially if it had something to do with his sister's dark fate, would Boruto still thwart Koji's plan to kill Kobu? But as we've discussed before, Boruto's story isn't that simple or straightforward. Every conflict, or even just a prediction, is how the community is built, right? So what is the conclusion from all this? A few days ago, we predicted some of the most important and crucial parts of Chapter 31. And before that, I was convinced that Boruto would come and save Kobu. But after seeing how the situation is, especially after the leak came out, I am now very sure that Kobu will not survive and that there will be no intervention at this point. However, the interesting part is, what will the next scenario be if Kobu really dies? Will it trigger panic or even chaos that goes beyond just the Mamushi invasion? In my opinion, the most reasonable and relevant answer lies with Sai. That is, at this point, Sai's position and role will truly determine the rest of the story. Currently, he suspects Shikamaru. Especially considering his gaze and such towards Kobu, it's enough to explain to Sai himself that Inojin is involved in this situation. So if Kobu dies, it's impossible that Konoha won't be involved in a much worse problem, especially if the daimyo himself knows how Kobu died. Because in my opinion, it's impossible that after Kobu's death, there won't be any further investigation or anything like that. Especially what reason did he have to go to the roof of the Konoha office in the middle of the Mamushi invasion? Some shinobi with special abilities and such certainly have special identification in this scenario and are even involved in it. Yeah, that's at least based on my own point of view if we assume or simulate to guess the direction of the next scenario. And I admit, as a fan, that's a brief prediction about the next scenario. So as a final conclusion, if we draw the big picture, Chapter 31 is no longer about whether Inojin is hesitant or not, but about the inevitable consequences. The mind-body switch is not a technique that can be used half-heartedly. If Kobu dies while Inojin is still in his body, then Inojin will also die. And seeing how Mamushi is already at the point of finishing off Kobu, it doesn't feel like this is a scene prepared to be saved by a sudden intervention like the case of Boruto against Jura before, especially if Boruto saves him and doesn't consider something far worse happening to his own sister. But personally, I don't think Boruto would save him, even though he had suspected it before. So if Kobu really dies, the impact will clearly not stop at the Hokage's office. It could trigger a major political crisis in Konoha, reinforce Sai's suspicions, shake Shikamaru's position, and even drag the daimyo into a conflict far more complicated than just Mamushi's invasion. So the biggest question now isn't whether Kobu survived or not, but who will bear the consequences of the decisions made at this moment, right? And yep, that's it. If you enjoyed this video or even have a more exciting prediction, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe. I'm Nim, without the E. See you in the next leak. Bye-bye, Data Bio.